Penguin Random House Audio presents Magic Kingdom for Sale. Sold by Terry Brooks. Read for you by Jeremy Arthur. The catalog item was listed in Rosen's Christmas wish book. Magic Kingdom for Sale. Landover, island of enchantment and adventure rescued from the mists of time, home of knights and knaves, of dragons and damsels, of wizards and warlocks. Magic mixes with iron, and chivalry is the code of life for the true hero. All of your fantasies become real in this kingdom from another world. Only one thread to this whole cloth is lacking. You, to rule over all as king and high lord. Escape into your dreams and be born again. Price, $1 million. Personal interview and financial disclosure. Inquire of Meeks, Home Office.
"This is nuts,"
Ben Holliday muttered. And yet, Rosen's had a reputation for integrity. Even on these special wishbook items, it delivered what was promised. For Kennard, Vernon, Bill, John, and Mike, it happened something like this. The Witch of the North seemed to think for a time, with her head bowed and her eyes upon the ground. Then she looked up and said, "I do not know where Kansas is, for I have never heard that country mentioned before. But tell me, is it a civilized country?" "Oh, yes," replied Dorothy. "Then that accounts for it. In the civilized countries I believe there are no witches left, nor wizards, nor sorceresses, nor magicians. But you see, the land of Oz has never been civilized, for we are cut off from all the rest of the world. There, we still have witches and wizards amongst us." L. Frank Baum, The Wizard of Oz. Ben. The catalog was from Rosen's Limited. It was the department store's annual Christmas wish book. It was addressed to Annie. Ben Holliday stood frozen before the open cubicle of his mailbox, eyes slipping across the gaily decorated cover of the catalog to the white address label and the name of his dead wife. The lobby of the Chicago high-rise seemed oddly still in the graying dusk of the late afternoon rush hour, empty of everyone but the security guard and himself. Outside, past the line of floor-to-ceiling windows that fronted the building entry, the autumn wind blew in chill gusts down the canyon of Michigan Avenue and whispered of winter's coming. He ran his thumb over the smooth surface of the wish book. Annie had loved to shop, even when the shopping had only been through the mail-order catalogs. Rosen's had been one of her favorite stores. Sudden tears filled his eyes. He hadn't gotten over losing her, even after 2 years. Sometimes it seemed to him that losing her was nothing more than a trick of his imagination, that when he came home, she would still be there, waiting for him. He took a deep breath, fighting back against the emotions that were aroused in him simply by seeing her name on that catalog cover. It was silly to feel like this. Nothing could bring her back to him. Nothing could change what had happened. His eyes lifted to stare into the dark square of the now empty mailbox. He remembered what it has been like when he had first learned that she had been killed. He had just returned from court, a pre-trial on the microlab case with old Wilson Frink and his sons. Ben was in his office, thinking of ways to persuade his opposition, a lawyer named Bates, that his latest offer of settlement would serve everyone's best interests, when the call had come in. Annie had been in an accident on the Kennedy. She was at St. Jude's in critical condition. Could he come right over? He shook his head. He could still hear the voice of the doctor telling him what had happened. The voice had sounded so calm and rational. He had known at once that Annie was dying. He had known instantly. By the time he had gotten to the hospital, she was dead. The baby was dead, too. Annie had been only 3 months pregnant. "Mr. Holliday?" He looked about sharply, startled by the voice. George, the security guard, was looking over at him from behind the lobby desk. "Everything all right, sir?" He nodded and forced a quick smile. "Yes, just thinking about something." He closed the mailbox door, shoved everything he had taken from it save the catalog into one coat pocket, and still gripping the wish book in both hands, moved to the ground floor elevators. He didn't care for being caught off balance like that. Maybe it was the lawyer in him. "Cold day out there," George offered, glancing out into the gray. "Going to be a tough winter. Lot of snow, they say. Like it was a couple of years ago."
"Looks that way."
Ben barely heard him as he glanced down again at the catalog. Annie always enjoyed the Christmas wish book. She used to read him promos from some of its more bizarre items. She used to make up stories about the kind of people who might purchase such things. He pushed the elevator call button and the doors opened immediately. "Have a nice evening, sir," George called after him. He rode the elevator to his penthouse suite, shucked off his topcoat, and walked into the front room, still clutching the catalog. Shadows draped the furnishings and dappled the carpeting and walls, but he left the lights off and stood motionless before the bank of windows that looked out over the sunroof and the buildings of the city beyond. Lights glimmered through the evening gray, distant and solitary, each a source of life separate and apart from the thousands of others. We are so much of the time alone, he thought. Wasn't it strange? He looked down again at the catalog. Why do you suppose they had sent it to Annie? Why were companies always sending mailers and flyers and free samples and God knew what all to people long after they were dead and buried? It was an intrusion on their privacy. It was an affront. Didn't these companies update their mailing lists? Or was it simply that they refused ever to give up on a customer? He checked his anger, and instead smiled, bitter, ironic. Maybe he should phone it all in to Andy Rooney. Let him write about it. He turned on the lights then and walked over to the wall bar to make himself a scotch, Glenlivet on the rocks with a splash of water. He measured it out and sipped at it, experimentally. There was a bar meeting in a little less than 2 hours, and he had promised Miles that he would make this one. Miles Bennett was not only his partner, but he was probably his only real friend since Annie's death. All of the others had drifted away somehow, lost in the shufflings and rearrangings of life's social order. Couples and singles made a poor mix, and most of their friends had been couples. He hadn't done much to foster continuing friendships in any case, spending most of his time involved with his work and with his private, inviolate grief. He was not such good company anymore, and only Miles had had the patience and the perseverance to stay with him. He drank some more of the scotch and wandered back again to the open windows. The lights of the city winked back at him. Being alone wasn't so bad, he reasoned. That was just the way of things. He frowned. Well, that was his way, in any case. It was his choice to be alone. He could have found companionship again from any one of a number of sources. He could have reintegrated himself into almost any of the city's myriad social circles. He had the necessary attributes. He was young still and successful. He was even wealthy, if money counted for anything. And in this world, it almost always did. No, he didn't have to be alone. And yet he did, because the problem was that he really didn't belong anyway. He thought about that for a moment, forced himself to think about it. It wasn't simply his choosing to be alone that kept him that way. It was almost a condition of his existence. The feeling that he was an outsider had always been there. Becoming a lawyer had helped him deal with that feeling, giving him a place in life, giving him a ground upon which he might firmly stand. But the sense of not belonging had persisted, however diminished its intensity. A nagging certainty. Losing Annie had simply given it new life, emphasizing the transiency of any ties that bound him to whom and what he had let himself become. He often wondered if others felt as he did. He supposed they must. He supposed that to some extent everyone felt something of the same displacement. But not as strongly as he suspected. Never that strongly. He knew Miles understood something of it, or at least something of Ben's sense of it. Miles didn't feel about it as Ben did, of course. Miles was the quintessential people person, always at home with others, always comfortable with his surroundings. He wanted...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?